2011 of the Finance Committee of the City of Santa Barbara will now come to order. Are there any members of the public wishing to comment on topics not on today's agenda? Seeing none, we will go to the first item. Mr. Falstich.
Good morning, members of the Finance Committee. My name is Stephen Falstich. I'm the Housing Program Supervisor, and I'm not presenting a budget item. I'm presenting a request through the city's Housing Rehabilitation Loan Program to fund some projects. The Housing Authority of the City of Santa Barbara has requested grants for needed repairs to 3 of their affordable housing rental projects. The rehabilitation grants would be funded through the city's Housing Rehabilitation Loan Program, known as the HRLP, from Community Development Block Grant funds received through repayment of prior HRLP loans. The use of these repayment funds is restricted by HUD and CDBG regulations to making new HRLP loans and grants. These funds must be used for rehabilitation of low-income housing. They may not be used for new construction. They can't be used for any other CDBG purposes. Since its inception in 1976, the city's HRLP has provided over $16 million in loans for repairs to 750 single-family homes that are owned by low-income households. The HRLP has also provided loans and grants totaling $14 million for repairs to low-income housing projects. These 44 projects total 600 units. Usually the HRLP is the only source of funds for needed repairs to these multifamily projects because the affordable rents are so low that the projects can't maintain adequate reserves. The HRLP no longer has the staffing to administer single-family rehabilitations. The HRLP has now narrowed its focus to affordable multifamily housing projects owned by nonprofit sponsors. The Housing Authority is one of these nonprofit sponsors, and so we've contacted them first and talked with them first about their needs, and they have 3 rehabilitation jobs that are ready to proceed. The largest grant being proposed is for the SHIFCO low-income housing project located at 418 Santa Fe Place. This is a senior-only project containing 107 one-bedroom units. The entire project is in need of a new roof or new roofs on all the buildings, and the estimated cost is about $550,000, but with 107 units it comes to an average of about $5,000 per unit. The second project is the 6-unit project at 2941 State. In October of 2010, the city's Redevelopment Agency Board approved a loan of $360,000 for the Housing Authority to purchase the property, and at that time the city also approved a grant of $90,000 in CDBG rehabilitation funds for initial rehabilitation work that was needed right away. But at that time, staff advised council that the Housing Authority would identify additional rehabilitation needs for the property and return later to request more funding for the project. And they have completed their assessment and are now requesting up to an additional $210,000 in CDBG funds for electrical upgrades, window replacement, interior work, and repairs to balconies and stairs. And then the third project is the completion of re-roofing at 521 North Lacumbra Road. This would cost about $90,000. The Housing Authority began to replace the roofs on this 60-unit senior housing project, but they didn't have sufficient funds in their replacement and repair reserves to complete the work. So this additional grant will enable them to complete the roofing work at that project. So the total estimated cost of these 3 jobs is $850,000, and staff recommends that you recommend to council approval of grants up to that amount. But as we went into in some detail in the staff report, the current balance of the loan repayment fund is less than $850,000. It's about $675,000, although between now and when the rehabilitation work is complete, there'll be additional monthly repayments that come into that fund, but we never know how much the repayments will be. At some point during the rehabilitation work, it's likely that the funds available will be exhausted, and so there won't be the full $850,000. And at that point, the Housing Authority will need to come up with another source of funds, or in the case of 2941 State Street, they just may have to reduce the scope of the rehabilitation because there wouldn't be any more funds available. The city doesn't usually approve grants in excess of available funds, but staff is proposing this unusual structure in order to facilitate the city's compliance with CDBG deadlines for the expenditure of new CDBG funds. The new funds are the last ones to come out, so all of the repayment funds have to be expended first before any of the new funds are expended, and by paying this down to a zero balance will really simplify the annual compliance for timeliness. So staff requests that the Finance Committee consider this item and vote to recommend that to the City Council that Council approve this at their meeting next week. There's Roberta Mishanti and Skip Szymanski from the City Housing Authority are here, and so they'd be able to answer any questions that I can't.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Falstich. Questions from committee members? No. I have a question. Mr. White?
I don't quite understand the cash flow situation out of this program. You said $16 million has been spent over many decades.
Yes, since 1976.
And chunks of that were grants and chunks of that were loans. Is that? That's
correct. Typically, the rehabilitation assistance to single-family homeowners, and as I said, it was $16 million, I think, is provided in the form of loans. And it was always anticipated that those loans would be repaid, even though they are often deferred until the death of the borrower or till the sale of the house. That still is money that comes in eventually, and that money would be used as a revolving loan fund, and so that's the funds that we're asking to use now.
So, and then on round two, they go from being loans to grants.
Well, if we still had a single-family a rehab program, we would probably continue to structure them as loans, but we'd no longer have the staffing to do that. So, and usually for the Housing Authority projects and other projects owned by nonprofits, they will not have the cash flow to repay a loan, and so we might as well just recognize that and structure it as a grant to begin with.
Thank you.
Mr. Falstich, how much of this HRLP money is out there currently as loans?
Council Member Francisco, that's a good question. I know that we have track of those through the Finance Department, and also through a loan servicer that we hire, but I don't have that number at my fingertips.
Okay.
I can try to find that out before the council meeting.
That would be great. So as I understand it, and is there any new CDBG money that is allocated for this purpose every year for the HRLP?
There had been until this year.
Okay.
This is the first year since 1976 that the program did not go and ask for new funds or for administrative funds through the CDBG process.
So that was a decision that the city made?
That's correct.
Okay. The point you raise about the nonprofits and these multifamily developments not being able to pay their own maintenance costs over the long haul. Mm-hmm. One of the reasons I'm interested in knowing how much of this HRLP money is out there, if what we're going to do is as the loans come back in and we turn around and grant those, obviously that goes down to zero at some point.
That's true.
And then we have the question of these low-income subsidized housing projects that will no longer have this source of funds.
That's correct. And one of the things the Housing Authority has been very aware of in designing and building their newer projects is the need to keep down the costs of maintenance and repairs in the future. And they have found that by increasing the quality of the materials that go into the project to begin with, that they're able to reduce the maintenance cost over time, and hopefully that they all do have replacement reserves, but the problem has been that the deterioration on the older projects happens faster than the budget will allow for the money to come in, and I believe that they're really making an effort to address that on the newer projects that they're building now.
Okay.
And the Housing Authority is here. They could address that in more detail.
Okay. Mr. White, did you have another?
Well, just
Comment?
the SHIFCO project, that's like a, I want to say is that a 50-year-old project kind of thing? I mean,
I believe it is from the 1960s, so
Yeah.
that would be right, 50 or 60 years old.
well, okay. No more questions.
Okay.
I have a comment.
Please.
Something that I've been curious about with our RDA funds going away is we have so many projects in this town. How are they going to be maintained once that fund evaporates? And I could sort of foresee, are we going to have to sell them so we can cherry pick the ones we want to maintain? I mean, I don't see a way without huge general fund obligations being able to maintain the vast quantity of housing that not only the Housing Authority but other nonprofits rely on, assistance from the public at large to maintain. So I'd be interested in that, what you're planning for at some time. You don't need to do it now, but I think that conversation.
Skip, if you
should
do want to
happen.
say something, feel
Yeah,
free.
if you want to, that's.
Yeah, Skip Szymanski with the Housing Authority, City of Santa Barbara. The Housing Authority would not intend to sell any of its properties. One of the things, or one of the benefits, is that we would eventually be owning all of our properties free and clear, and with future economics, there would be opportunity to borrow against the property and still have a cash flow that we could maintain. We do build a reserve when opportunities such as this present themselves. It is a good opportunity for the Housing Authority or other nonprofits to put that money to good use and to build the reserve for the future. So although we may not be able to do the work that we're able to do now with these grants, we would eventually look to build up reserves so that the properties would not deteriorate, that we could maintain them in the care and condition that we were used to having them in. SHIFCO is 1972. It was built in 1972.
So 40 years old.
Yes.
One more comment. Some cities, rather than building housing where all of these projects come off the tax rolls, create through their housing mandate vouchers, so that these people are housed through a voucher program in private properties. The private properties are contributing to the tax rolls, and the private property owner then maintains these properties. There seems to be sort of a win-win there. Maybe that discussion could be started.
Yes, in that regard, the Housing Authority does have vouchers. We have them coming through the federal government, and we have a smaller program that we've just set up with the city with vouchers where we do go to the private landlords. We have about 2,000 vouchers. The benefit of the properties that we do own, it gives us the ability to control the properties as far as the condition and so on. I think the Housing Authority and the City of Santa Barbara has a good balance between the vouchers and the units that we own. Also looking to the future, the low-income housing tax credits are an avenue that some of the existing projects can be converted into tax credit projects, which brings in another influx of funding for maintaining or upgrading the properties. So I think the government is looking towards the future. The Housing Authority is looking towards the future to avert having to sell affordable housing properties or to allow them to go in disrepair.
Thank you.
Anything else, Mr. White?
Yeah, and that the voucher being the Section 8, is that the what we're
That's
talking
correct.
about there?
Yeah, Housing Choice Voucher, Shelter Plus Care, there's a number of programs, but primarily referred to as Section 8, yes.
Okay. And then also, I mean, first of all, it's this conversation just speaks to what we're talking about infrastructure being just not being sustained over time, and yet another big unfunded liability, shall we say. And so I think it would be useful for councils to have a sense of that year in, year out. And I know I don't yet. So I would appreciate being educated on that, and because it's just it looms, as Ms. Self said. And you're obviously thinking about it all the time, and it's a constant worry. You don't want to raise rents, but that's an area where are there opportunities? I mean, from my perspective, I would rather have some. If there are projects where there is some room to raise rent and it's still darn cheap, that will add up over time and help with the problem. So, and I appreciate that there are projects that are mandated to be at certain price points, and we don't have a choice. But if there is any flexibility in that, I think that would be another topic for to share.
Yes.
But we need a feel for what the scope of that problem.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Szymanski. Okay, I think that, in my view, is given that these funds can be used for no other purpose, and since we are phasing out the loan program, it makes pretty good sense to use these in the way that staff has recommended, and I would entertain a motion to that effect. If
So
someone cares
moved.
to make it. Any further discussion? No. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Falstich. Mr. Samario?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. So we're going to continue our discussion on fiscal year 2012 recommended budget. Today we're going to be talking mostly about fees, general fund fees, and then we're also going to include within that a discussion of the Gulf Fund fees. The order today will be we'll start with community development, and then followed by Parks and Recreation, general fund fees, as well as the Gulf Fund, fire, and then police. And then on next Tuesday, we'll continue that discussion of fees moving into the enterprise funds. So the focus today is really general fund plus golf. And with that, I'll turn it
Very
over to
good.
Paul Casey.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Casey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, committee members. Paul Casey, Assistant City Administrator and Community Development Director. We were just before the City Council yesterday with fees, so I'll be very succinct and then answer any questions, and Ms. Weiss is here to help me out as well. Two fee issues this year recommended. One is on the planning side, a 5% fee increase on the planning fees, not including appeals or zoning information reports. We'll keep those static. This is kind of our long, ongoing, multi-year effort to try to reduce the general fund subsidy on the planning side, but not wanting to be very aggressive this year with the economic climate. And so we just thought it was prudent to continue to chip away with the 5% fee increase for the planning fees this year. On the building and safety side, also recommending a 5% increase. Last year, we did not have any increases in the building and safety fees. And so we don't want to put off too many years of not having those fees kind of keep pace with the full cost recovery effort that we do accrue in the building and safety world. And so we're recommending a 5% increase in the building and safety fees this year. And with that, I guess one thing I would just mention that I didn't mention yesterday that came up this morning when I was meeting with a developer in town talking about our process and timeliness being their biggest concern. And on the fee side, not a concern about the fees they pay, but concern about what our impact fees will be. And that impact fees in other jurisdictions, development impact fees, are usually a big ticket item that do have a big impact on whether they go forward with the project or not. And the City of Santa Barbara does not have any impact fees, except on the inclusionary housing side. There is an inclusionary housing fee that comes in for certain housing projects, but on most projects we don't have any traffic impact fees, which are usually one of the big ones. So when you look at kind of a cost comparison, that usually really tips us in a favorable view towards the development community. But with that, happy to answer any questions.
One.
Mrs. Self.
Since this is not an easy town to develop in, is it more of our design guidelines that inhibit, more growth? Do we expect more? I know we have the REACH code, which is more stringent than the state in environmental things, and are there sort of offsets in that direction?
Mr. Chair and Member Self, that's a fair question. It's hard to pinpoint one exact thing. I think that we have had a community standard of wanting a very thorough development review process, and I think
Right.
it's served us well for
I agree.
decades and decades. But it's a variety of things. It's very thorough environmental review. It's very thorough planning review, consistent with the municipal code, planning commission review, and then also certainly a very thorough design review. And so we're always looking not to sacrifice that quality, but try to make it more straightforward, more understandable, and as consistent as possible. So yes, so as you know, we're constantly updating our design guidelines or creating
Right.
design guidelines, because that helps. First day through the door, here's some design guidelines. If you go in this direction, you're going to have an easier time getting through our process. And so we do try to do those qualitative improvements to assist people to get through the process without sacrificing the quality of the review.
And do we still have an incentive program for people who reach certain LEED standards?
Yes. In the building and safety side, we do when you get to the plan check time, which is important because that's when you're getting your financing in place and you're ready to start construction. We've partnered with the Contractors Association and their Built Green program, that if you hit a certain threshold of the Built Green program, you get expedited plan check service.
Okay.
And similar with the LEED program as well.
Thank you.
Mr. White?
Well, Mr. Chair, I think a key ingredient of why development is slow here is that the city is basically built out, so that you don't have big empty spaces where an owner is trying to then develop a return from a blank space. There's something on the ground that's producing income already, and so you have to. You start by demolishing something that's already making money for you, and that's a very different than, let's say, in the city of Goleta, where there are still major patches of vacant land that are getting converted to development. So it's a built-out city.
Very true. Mr. Casey, I had a question for you. In both planning and building and safety, what is the percentage of cost recovery based on fees?
Mr. Chair, it's a good question. In very rough terms, on the planning side, we feel we're around 40% cost recovery, and we'd like to get that closer to 50%. And in building and safety, we're at full cost recovery, and we think we're pretty much right on target there. And so that's why we're kind of in a maintenance mode on the building and safety fees. If you get into the nuances of different categories within planning, it's different kind of cost recovery levels. And so if you want to kind of dig in, like zoning information reports we mentioned yesterday, that's pretty a straightforward service that we provide, and we shoot for more full cost recovery on that. I think on the zoning plan check side, we're shooting for more full cost recovery similar to the building plan check side. But then on the development review side, it's closer to 40% in the design review boards. And there are a few, like appeals and a few other things, that are heavily discounted, just kind of from a policy standpoint.
And what would you say, do you know what policies are in other municipalities and how we compare?
Yeah, it's a fair question. Almost all jurisdictions on the building and safety side shoot for full cost recovery, so we're very consistent in that standpoint. It's a variety of answers you'll get on the planning side from different communities. There are a number who go for full cost recovery, and they generally do that on an hourly basis in which you put a deposit down, and then the planners and the people working on the project track their time and bill the developer directly for that cost of the time, such that every month the developer gets an an additional bill as their project is being processed through the system. Counties generally work under that sort of umbrella, and the County of Santa Barbara works under that umbrella. Then at the city level, you get a mixture. You get some like us who are flat fee, some that are flat fee and shoot for more full cost recovery, some that are flat fee and are still subsidized to some extent. So it's a more varied. We've done research with other jurisdictions to kind of get answers to that, and it's just one size doesn't fit all in that regard on the planning side.
Okay, thank you. Do you need a recommendation from us on this, or is it just a report? Okay. Any other questions?
Yes. If building and safety is pretty much getting full cost recovery, do we need a 5% increase?
Mr. Chair and members, that's a fair question. We feel we do for a couple reasons. One is we passed on last year of raising fees, and so it was flat. And with kind of the ongoing background overhead cost, we do have increased of cost of retirement and PERS costs and such that we want to try to maintain pace with. And so that's why we didn't want to skip too many years, even though we haven't seen actual salary increases from staff. There are kind of other costs that just continue to creep up that we don't want to fall behind on.
Thank you.
Okay.
Just as a general comment, Mr. Chair, in June, we are going to have the Finance Committee bring to City Council recommendations based on the review of these topics.
Okay.
So to the extent you see anything you want more information on, before that time frame, or you want to develop some particular recommended changes, we can note those things, and in June, when we're all done, we'll compile all those into a single recommendation. We'll probably devote at least one meeting to kind of bring it all together for you and say, okay, how do you want to handle these items, any changes recommended or not? But just to kind of be thinking about that as we move through these presentations.
Okay, good. Well, from a policy point of view, I think this question of the percentage of cost recovery in the different areas is something that Council will be interested in, and also possibly a policy decision on what our targets should be. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Casey.
But, Mr. Chair, there's one other area which I have a question about, and that is the inclusionary fee. That actually is a Plan Santa Barbara issue rather than a fee issue that we're talking about here, or?
Mr. Chair and Member White, currently we do have an inclusionary ordinance fee that was adopted a couple years ago ahead of the Plan Santa Barbara process we're in now. The question is grounded again in Plan Santa Barbara, and there is policy direction included in that we'll want to see where Council comes out on. But currently we do have an inclusionary ordinance that includes a fee.
But that's not a part of what this conversation is about, or would go to Council in June. That just stays
Separate.
Silent at this point, and there will be a topic at some point under Plan Santa Barbara to talk about that. Yep. Okay.
No, we're not recommending any change to that fee. That was just my example of a development impact fee. That is one that we kind of have on the books now.
Right.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to Parks and Recreation.
Okay.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the Finance Committee. I'm Nancy Rapp. I'm the Parks and Recreation Director. And with me today is Judith McCaffrey, our Parks and Recreation Manager. And so we're going to briefly cover the revenues, the general fund revenues in the Parks and Recreation budget, and then talk a bit about fees, and then cover the golf budget. So I just wanted to quickly show you some of the changes in the general fund revenues over the last few years. And you can see that the biggest changes have been that we have increased revenue on the Parks Division side, and that's simply a matter of contracts which have now moved over to the Parks Division contract services, and that means revenue coming into Parks. Recreation, no surprise. We've been very challenged by the economy, so over the years we've seen a decrease in revenues there. And but overall, comparing our FY12 budget to FY11, minor change, a decrease of 1.7%. And very quickly looking at how our revenues come in, You can see that about 1.7 million of our revenue is contracts, that's services that we provide for others. We get about 250,000 in revenue from rents and leases from our community centers and other facilities. And then our park and facility rentals, about $1.1 million, and about $1.2 million in our recreation activities and classes. And I just wanted to quickly show you just some of the, well, it's the total of the contracts that the Parks Division has that generate revenue. Their cost recovery is 26%, and the Recreation Division is at 52%. And we wanted to just show you very quickly the many different recreation programs. You can see the change in their revenue just from last year's budget. And I think the more notable things that I would point out to you is most of the changes that you're seeing are just a reflection of how programming changes from one year to the next. And so nothing major there. You are seeing an increase in revenue for active adults. That is the program that is substantially the Carrillo Recreation Center and all of the youth and adult classes that take place there. So that facility is now going to be back up, and we'll see an increase in revenue related to that. The 30% decrease in revenue in tennis has an equal reduction on the expenditure side. That's the last of the savings from the transfer of the Las Positas tennis facility to Elings Park, because that was a 9-month agreement for this current year. And overall, recreation revenue is down 3.3% compared to last year. And again, cost recovery here is 52%. Overall, for the department, cost recovery is 35% on the general fund side.
Mr. Rapp, could we just go back to that previous slide for a moment, the one
Sure.
about contracts?
Yes.
So, for instance, street tree maintenance.
Yes.
You're saying that's getting $951,000 from UUT?
Yes.
Okay. And yet, the cost of street tree maintenance is such that we're only covering 26% with those revenues?
No. The street tree maintenance is 100% cost for cost. The cost of the street tree program is 100% covered by UUT.
Okay.
We do, Forestry Division does, and this has been an area that has been significantly reduced in the last couple of years. The general fund supports the maintenance of park and facility trees. So we've seen a huge reduction there as we've had to contract the general fund for the Parks Division. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So what is the significance of the 26%?
That is of the total expenditure base for the Parks Division. So 26% of their budget is covered by revenue.
Okay. But that, in the things that you're listing, that varies, the cost recovery percentage varies widely. Is that true?
Actually, the cost recovery percentage individually for the street tree program is 100%. The cost of the State Street maintenance, that's 50% of the contract that the city has with the DO. The waterfront parking landscape is 100% cost recovery. The Sheffield landscape, 100%. Chase Palm Park, that's an amount that comes in from Fess Parker on an annual basis towards the maintenance of Chase Palm Park. So it's not recovering the full cost. And the others are just small donations that are commitments.
Okay. It would be nice to maybe just have those percentages there. It would be nice to know what those are.
Certainly. Yeah, that's easy for us to do.
Okay.
We'll add that to our presentation
Great.
next week.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. White?
So do we back into then the cost? This is the revenue is $1,007,000, and so that's 26% of our cost. So then the total cost is 4 times that or whatever. So 4 times 1.7?
No, and it's really because this is just showing the revenues of the park division budget, and the majority of the park division budget is spent on park maintenance, which is not revenue driven. So this is just simply the number of the park division budget expenditures and then the revenue that we bring in, and the revenue is primarily contracts. And those are 100% cost recovered of the Parks Division budget.
Okay. And then on the street tree maintenance, is that a combination of contracting out and staff?
That's correct.
Can you give a little, teach us a little bit about what that is?
We do have a combination of in-house crews and contracting. We have, over the last few years, reduced staff in that area and increased contracting. And we continue to weigh each vacancy that we have and look at that. We have also changed what tree pruning work we hire contracts to do as compared to where we use our in-house staff. Who are perhaps better trained and skilled, particularly when it comes to some of the more valuable tree resources that we have as a community. But it is a balance between the two.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Mrs. White. I mean, Mrs. Self. Wasn't implying anything.
The recreation that we provide, do you know the cost, including overhead, for providing those classes to the community?
We provide a number of different classes, and if I might suggest that we maybe hold that question to when we do our budget presentation,
Okay.
because we actually show what percentage of our budget is spent on programs that are 100% cost recovery, those that are a partial cost recovery, and those that are fully subsidized by the general fund. And I think that might help answer some of those questions.
Thank you.
So moving on to the fees, just briefly, Judith McCaffrey will give an overview.
Just briefly, there are a number of factors staff look at and consider when determining our fees, including the community need and importance of the program, the demographics of our target audience. Staff also review each fee annually and do a market comparison to ensure that our fees are in line with other like programs in the community. And certainly we also look at our cost recovery for our programs. In this budget cycle, we simplified our fees and charges document. So we eliminated a number of free programs that we listed previously and canceled and removed a number of programs that are no longer offered. We're proposing very small fee increases in fiscal year 12. We've found that increasing the fees in small increments over time has been much more successful than more larger, infrequent increases in maintaining our program participation and our facility rentals. In fiscal year 12, we have 255 program and facility fees. Basically half will remain unchanged. 36% are proposed to increase 1% to 5%. 5% of the fees are proposed to increase 6 to 10%, and 4% of the fees are proposed to increase 11%. And I'd like to note there that a number of those increases from the 6 to 11% range in many cases are no more than $1. We've also added 16 new fees for new programs, new rental opportunities at the Creo Recreation Center. Just wanted to highlight a couple changes on our proposed program fees. One would be our junior lifeguard program, which is one of our most popular summer programs. We're proposing a fee increase of 3%, or basically $10. And actually, this fee increase would, since our fees become active or implemented September 1st, it actually wouldn't even occur till next summer of 2012. Also, our daily adult tennis permits. That's an example there, a $1 increase from $7 to $8, a 16% increase, $1. We're proposing an increase this year as those fees have remained unchanged for the last 2 years. Here's an example of some of our facility and event fee changes. To highlight the top one here for private gatherings of 50 to 400 attendees, we're proposing a 5% increase. And to give you kind of a context of what that means, a group of up to 50 would their fee would be increased $10. A group up to 400 would be $38 for their 10-hour rental of a park venue. Lastly, we're proposing a 5% increase at our 3 beachfront facilities, the Cabrillo Pavilion Arts Center, Chase Palm Park Center, and Casa Las Palmas. These facilities are expensive to maintain. Because of this, staff have been encouraged in the past by council to increase our rental fees, sometimes as much as 25%, to ensure that all our operating costs are covered by those rental fees. So the general fund is not subsidizing the many private events that occur at these facilities. With the proposed 5% increase, our facilities are still a really good bargain in the community and are very competitively priced with similar facilities. And again, to give you an example of what that might mean, for an 8-hour rental at the Cabrillo Pavilion, where the fee is approximately $1,600, that would equate to a $76 increase. And before Nancy moves on to talk specifically about the Golf Fund, if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Questions? Please go ahead.
Okay, moving on to golf, and I am going to spend just a little bit of time giving a context to the discussion, and some of this will be expanded on when we do our budget presentation, but I'm sure that you're aware the golf course has been really challenged lately, so I do want to spend a little bit of time on that. So we have had some challenges there. Our rounds are down 11% since fiscal year 2009, and our revenue is down at a greater level, 17.5%. For the last 10 years or more, we, along with other golf courses in the country, have seen a decline in rounds. The assumption is that there are fewer people playing golf, and also there was a tremendous increase in the number of golf courses that were built both here locally and other places across the country. And the latest information that we have is that rounds are projected to stay relatively flat over the next 10 years. We've also been very affected by the poor economy. And we recently received a study from the National Recreation Park Association in conjunction with the National Golf Foundation that indicate we're not the only ones struggling, and in fact many municipal golf courses have been struggling. Our golf course is recovering from 2 major construction projects, and so we are still doing a good job on bringing golfers back. And we've also, as always, been very impacted by the weather. It can be wind or rain, but it affects how that little white ball travels through the air. And so you can see that our rounds, you can see the change with the low in fiscal year 10. We went from 84,000 rounds in 07 down to 59,010. This year we're projecting to creep back up there at about 62,900, almost 63,000 rounds. And we are projecting next year to be a little below that. It's a conservative estimate. Hopefully we will actually grow above that. But we are projecting with FY12 about 62,000 rounds. And I just wanted to demonstrate here that our golf fees are about 80% of our revenue. Golf course revenue is stayed about the same at about $2 million. And looking at comparisons to FY10 actual and how we expect to do this year and what we're projecting in FY12, you can see that golf fee revenues have gone from 1.4. This year we're projecting a little over 1.5, and our projection for next year is about 1.6 million. Concessions have stayed about the same, some moderate growth from FY10. And you can see we've lost our interest income, which is just a reflection of what's happening with the markets. And the notable thing for FY12 is that you'll see the transfers in. That is actually the workers' comp rebate that all of the funds are benefiting from in next year. This amount really is very helpful to the golf course for helping us to balance our revenues for this year. We, of course, won't have that for next year. So this year will be a critical year for us in planning for the golf course. We've been doing a lot of analysis to really get down to understanding who's playing the golf course and what are the factors that we control and how do we make good decisions moving forward. And what we've learned is that the majority of play is from approximately 400 golfers. 23% of that play is seniors. And interesting, over the last 2 or 3 years, the senior rounds are down 19%. We also have noticed over the last year especially that people are choosing to play when rates are lower, a reflection of us all responding to the economy. Our weekend rounds are down 40%. Weekday rounds, which are less expensive, are up 13%. And our severely discounted rounds, the great deals, are up 142%, and then access rounds, same thing, up 87%. So we have people playing, they're just playing at a more discounted time for us. We've also, in the stats, seen that fewer people are playing in tournaments. So, yes, we're down a couple of tournaments, but the more impressive number is actually that fewer people are playing in the various tournaments. So, our strategy this year, we've worked very closely with the Golf Advisory Committee, and I want to thank them. Many members of the Golf Advisory Committee are here, and the chair of our Park and Recreation Commission, who is the liaison to the Golf Advisory Committee, is here. We have worked very closely with them and with our concessionaires to develop our strategy. We want to maintain a quality product. The golf course is in excellent condition. We want to make sure we continue that. In terms of our marketing, we have 3 goals. 1, bring the golfers back. 2, retain our existing golfers. And 3, encourage those golfers to play more. And those factors were the base for which we developed our fee strategy that I'll go into next. We also have developed a very conservative budget, holding back on expenditures, and we very carefully analyzed fee options and are proposing some fee increases. And also, we are proposing a modified term for our general fund construction loan. Last year, we had asked if the $500,000 loan from the general fund, which supported the golf course safety improvement plan, we were supposed to begin paying that back this year, and we asked if that could be postponed 1 year. And then we would see what the financial condition of the golf course was. We have proposed in our budget that we actually will begin paying that loan back in next year's budget, but we have asked that the payment amount be reduced to $50,000 a year instead of the planned $100,000 a year for the next 3 years to allow the golf course to really stabilize and get back on track. And so it just pushes our loan payments further out into the future. So with the fees, the last increase was July 2008. If you'll remember, last year we had brought fee recommendations forward, but we were able to go back and negotiate some things and did not raise fees. As I mentioned, the Golf Advisory Committee has met, had numerous meetings on fees and budget proposals. We looked at a variety of alternatives and options, did a lot of analysis. We worked very closely with the Golf Marketing Committee in developing those. And we are taking a business marketing approach to our proposed fee structure. And as always, we look at the comparison to other golf courses. So these are the proposed changes. We are proposing to eliminate the county resident fee. This is a $25 fee that used to be the payment for a card, which entitled you to qualify for the lower resident rates. With our new software, we really don't have a card anymore, and so there was a lot of resentment from golfers who were residents that they had to pay $25 to prove that they were a resident, and there really they weren't paying for anything. But we are proposing to eliminate that. About 3,000, we figure about 3,000 residents are playing out at the golf course, and that will, sorry, let me rephrase that. We sold 3,000 of these cards last year, so we know that that will be a cost savings to the residents, and we also know that many of the non-residents that are the rounds that are classified as non-residents, they are actually residents, but they are the ones who chose not to pay the $25 fee. I'm sorry if that got a little confusing. I think it will get better. All that to say, this is a real customer service priority for us. We didn't want to irritate people in the golf shop with what they perceive to be an unnecessary fee. So we have built a fee structure around eliminating that. At the same time, we have a very popular frequent user card that entitles regular golfers to discounts on their rounds. We are proposing to eliminate that and replace it with a player rewards program that has all the benefits of the frequent user card plus additional benefits like a discount on cart rentals, free clinics, and a variety of other promotions, courtesy, exclusive advanced tee time, online opportunities that are not available to the other golfers. So the marketing committee and the golf advisory committee is finalizing all of the benefits that will be part of that program, but they feel very strongly that this is a real benefit for our base golfers that play the golf course on a regular basis. The GAC also wanted to encourage more junior golf, so they are reducing the rates to $12 7 days a week. So our fees are currently $18 and $12, so it's $12 7 days a week, and then they're also working on specials that they will offer over the year to really target junior golfers and to grow the sport of golf. And we are proposing increases to most greens fees, $1 for senior rates, $3 for residents and tournaments, and $8 for non-residents. And we do believe that these fees are still competitive with other courses, and we feel that the fee increase is largely offset by the savings to many of the residents by not having to pay the county resident fee, and then the benefits of the player rewards program. So controversial and a little risk, but we really believe that this is the right way to go. We do have members of the Golf Advisory Committee who are here, and if you would like to hear from them, they would be happy to share their perspective, but they're very supportive of the direction that we're going and the proposed fees. I did want to cover the golf fund reserves because we are definitely not in a good place. We built up our golf fund reserves between 2004 and 2007 because we were going to undertake the multi-year golf course safety improvement plan. That was a major capital project. And so we built up those reserves with the intent of using those funds to cover the majority of the cost of the project. And in addition to those reserves, we also borrowed the $500,000 from the general fund. So unfortunately for us, the economy and the construction had a pretty big impact on us. So you can see that we are far below where our policy reserves are. And I think we are making the best decisions that we can for a municipal golf course. We are very hopeful that we will get through this difficult time and begin adding back our reserves, but it's a delicate balance between generating fees sufficient to cover our expenses and having competitive fees in the community. And we, depending on how FY12 goes, and we'll be monitoring it very closely, we may have to look at other alternatives, and we know that. And that's our golf budget. And I did wanted to note that the Golf Advisory Committee was unanimous in their support.
Okay. Questions from the committee? Mrs. Self?
Does the senior need to pay for a card? Is there a senior card you have to pay for?
No, there is not.
Okay. When I was at one of the meetings, it talked that any hotel non-resident could get the residence rate. Is
Yes,
that true?
Councilmember Self, sorry, forming my thoughts. One of our real efforts this year has been marketing. And so we've been working with Chris Tallarico, the director of golf, and Chris has been going out and developing relationships with our various hotels and offering specials. And that was one of our specials called Play Like a Resident,
Right.
Play Like a Local. And part of our theory with increasing the non-resident rates, most of the people who play at that rate they play 1 or 2 times a year. They're one-time visitors or occasional visitors. And it allows us to offer special discounted rates when we develop our promotions to work with the various hotels. And that's part of our theory for that.
Yeah, so it's kind of subsidizing, we're raising rates on residents and seniors to subsidize a discount for non-residents.
I would say that it's probably really not doing that, only because, about 75% of our rounds per year are residents, and almost 14% are non-resident rounds. And of that 14%, again, we believe that a good portion of those are actually residents who, instead of paying the $25 fee to pay the lower resident fees on a year-round basis, just pay the non-resident rate. We probably will see that change in this year, because now all of the residents, whether you've paid that $25 fee or not, play at the discounted resident rates.
Right. Because when you eliminate a card for $25 and a user card for $85, but then you've got this other program that is more expensive than
Yes.
those combined, I think that's going to be a hard sell. I know the frequent user card a few years ago, you used to be able to get one for weekdays only and a weekend one, but that was eliminated and the price bumped up. And I just question the wisdom of raising prices when things are so hard. For the third year, we're not going to get Social Security rates for our seniors. But we all know inflation is afoot. And I like very much the reduction in fees for juniors to encourage them to get out there, and the golf courses are beautiful. But I know last time, and it wasn't so much due to the construction, but I think what hurt our golf course was, I would question, quote, the competitive aspect, because several players would foreign a car and off they went to Ventura or Ojai or all of that. And so sometimes increasing rates doesn't necessarily increase revenue. So I just question it at this point in our economy and the mood of people, if that's, if it's going to play out as we hope. So that's my comments. And then the other, I had a question about the safety loan.
The golf course safety improvement project and the general fund loan.
Right.
This was a project that the cost was, to my recollection, about $2 million. This was to make a number of changes and improvements for how the golf course played in the design of the various holes to keep the golf balls on the golf course premises. So that was the golf course safety improvement plan.
Okay, part of it, and I'm sure this wasn't part of it, but part of, knowing many golfers, what irritated them was taking out some of the challenges. Golf is a game, and challenges are important. And having the course marshal run behind you with a cattle prod so he could squeeze more plays in was less than enjoyable, and so that sort of chased off people. And so what do they say about advertising? It is much easier to keep a customer than once you've lost them. It's a long time to get them back. So those are just my cautionary notes that people who are involved in a sport usually are involved in it for the sport and the challenge of it, not just to be able to be out in a tree. Thank you.
All good points and all discussed ad nauseum in our meetings.
Mr. White, did you have any questions or comments?
I'm, for being a lifetime resident, I'm uniquely ignorant about the golf world out there. How does this course compare in cost to, I expect that there's probably a couple of that you would use as your basic competitors. I mean, there are a few day-round courses out there. What's the comparison of cost between this one, and I'm imagining this one's cheaper?
If I could defer that to our May 9th presentation, only because when we did our preliminary research more than 2 months ago, the golf courses that we contacted hadn't made decisions yet about fee increases. Well, we've been contacting them and finding out what fee increases they are proposing so that we're comparing like to like. And we're about halfway through that list right now. So, but we do plan to add that as a table so that we can see where we stand, because I know that it comes down to, how much are you going to play golf. And I think, one advantage for us is the increased cost of gas, which means that people will now have to put that into the equation. But very much so, we need to be priced so that it's affordable and that we can maintain the golf course as it needs to be and get it financially stable.
Yeah. And then the other piece is with both this and with tennis, and I'm sure it's the lawn bowling, etc., there's the development of a community or of a club within the facility. And I'd appreciate, maybe today is not the day to hear about that, but I'm imagining that's part of the marketing and part of what the programming of the course, and I'd appreciate hearing about that.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Rapp and Ms. McCaffrey.
Okay, so we're going to move on to fire. And I'm going to switch the monitor real quickly.
Good afternoon, Chief.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the the Finance Committee, Andrew Demizia, Fire Chief, here today with Fire Department staff to present recommended changes to the Fire Department's fee schedule for fiscal year 2012-2013. I'll just provide a brief overview. Luckily, I have this great staff to make it easy on the old Fire Chief here today. They'll provide the bulk of the presentation. I'd like to just say the general strategy we looked at when we were considering changes to our fee structure for this year was we had two issues in mind. First of all, we wanted to try and streamline the process. Our fee schedule was really established that we have now, the bulk of which was established way back in 2004 for the 2005 fiscal year. It really hasn't changed much since then. There's a lot of different categories, a lot of strata of different permitting inspection fees. We wanted to streamline those as much as possible, so I think you'll see that reflected in this proposal. The second strategy that we looked at was in basically in reviewing that things really haven't changed much since 2004. We felt that we would try and reduce the general fund subsidy as whatever we could. So we will be recommending some increases, but we wanted to make sure that those increases were reasonable. And in comparison to other fire departments in terms of the fees that they charge. So at this time, I'd like to turn the mic over to Fire Marshal Joe Poire, who's here with me today. Joe will provide a general overview of our proposal. And also with me today is our Administrative Services Manager, Ron Lechty. And after Joe has done the overview, Ron will put some of our fees in perspective with our overall budget.
Okay, great. Mr. Poirier?
Chair Francisco, members of the committee, the fire department fees, as you know, are not designed to recover full costs of the operation of the department. In fact, they're a small part of our revenue. They generally partially recoup costs on inspections like state-mandated fire inspections, fire code inspections that are of the California Fire Code, community development efforts, and extraordinary fees. Throughout the years, the fire fees have been increased on an as-needed basis. In 2004, we did a comprehensive fee study survey that revamped all of our fees and increased them or adjusted them across the board. That fee study was done by a professional fee consultant. Since 2000, that was for the fiscal year 2005 budget. Since 2005, we've made minor adjustments here and there, but have made no across-the-board fee increase adjustments in the fire department fee schedule. The last full review in 2004 then was the last time we actually raised all of our fees. Other changes in fee structure that we did this year, and we are proposing a fee increase of roughly 6% across the board this year. Except for a few minor ones, we made some adjustments for more flexibility. For instance, we took a small business fee and broke it down into quarter-hour increments so that if we were inspecting a very small business, that we could apply a fraction of an hourly fee to it. And we also took our base fee and reduced it to $25 for a simple review that required no follow-up. Our previous fee before that was $89 as a flat rate. The fee schedule itself is broken down into about 9 different areas. Specialty permits for the fire department are based on fire code permits, and there are about 56 of them in the fire code. And they range through a wide variety, as you can see from the fee schedule in front of you, a wide variety of different types of things, from open burning to assembly, ad hoc assembly, and other types of requirements that are strictly based on the California Fire Code. State-mandated fees in section number 2 all apply to state-mandated inspections that have to do with nursing homes, hospitals, daycare facilities, and that type of occupancy. Plan review is our contribution to community development, where we review plans for architectural, fire safety systems, sprinkler systems, alarm systems, and so forth, right here in this building as part of the land development team staff. The standby personnel and hazmat response section is for when we either require or need to have fire department personnel stand by at a special event, for instance, a film shoot, that type of thing. And the A new part of the section under this heading is the hazmat recovery fees. And the hazardous materials recovery fees have to do with when we respond to an actual incident, when we respond to a spill or a release of hazardous materials, that we can recover some of the costs associated with that. Fire prevention field inspections are largely engine company inspections. Those are the routine inspections. And those are the ones that the engine companies do for both district familiarity and to make sure that occupancies are reasonably fire safe. There is a section for false alarms. That's section number 6. Public education, which is fire extinguisher training and CERT. Those have always been nominal fees, and they remain to be very inexpensive. Airport inspection fees are the refueler fees and special occupancy types, for instance, airport aircraft hangars. And the hazardous materials business plan fees in the final section are Cooper-related fees, the fees that we charge for participating in the county-wide hazardous materials inspection and location program. We did a minor cost comparison, absent a full review of our entire fee structure. Just for comparison purposes, we have a number of like cities. And a couple of there's one that's Ventura County Fire Department here that's significantly larger than we are, and we threw them in because they were local. But for the most part, most of these cities are like cities to us, either in size or in number of apparatus. And if you look at the fee schedule as a whole, we're generally running currently below all of these other departments. In fact, across the board, it's about 32% lower in these specific areas, which is in the areas that I've outlined here: the basic fire code, the plan review, sprinkler systems, routine inspections, kitchen hood inspections, and alarms. And these are typical areas that a Fire Prevention Bureau and a fire department will go out and conduct inspections on. In some cases, it's hard to compare like for like because we all have different methodologies for calculating them. So in places where that's occurred in this particular schedule, you can see where, for instance, Newport Beach has 20 to 50% of building fees, which would be hard to calculate not knowing the specific project. But in any case, even with the two top lines, you can see Santa Barbara City proposed and Santa Barbara City current. Even with the proposed new fees, which would be about a 6% increase, we still will run at about 28% below these other comparable cities. So what we're recommending this year is an increase of approximately 6% across the board with fire department fees. And I'll let Mr. Lechte give an overview of the fire department fee structure in general.
Good afternoon.
Mr. Lechte.
Thank you. Good afternoon, committee members. I'm pleased to present to you just a couple of slides that show the fire department's fees and revenues. This first slide displays the fire department's total income, and it's separated by the fees we charge versus the revenues we also receive. The fees are at the top section of the schedule, and the revenues are in the bottom section. And the columns represent from left to right the fiscal year 10 actual numbers, the adopted budget and projected year-end actual amounts for fiscal year 11, and our recommended budget amounts for fiscal years 12 and 13. As you can see, the fees are relatively stable across the years on top there, but there are two items I would like to call to your attention. The first is in other fees. There's a $53,000 amount in the fiscal year 11 projected column. This is a result of a $38,000 one-time insurance proceeds payment for the reimbursement for damage that was incurred due to a leaking pipe in our administration office. And the remainder of those fees are for train reimbursements, sales of scrap, that kind of thing. We're recommending $6,000 for this category for the next budget cycle because we can only anticipate fees for the regular trainings that we perform, and we may also receive some funds from the producers of our new TV show, On Duty. The second item is small but worth mentioning. Joe mentioned it earlier. We have hazmat cost recovery fee of $5,000 projected for fiscal year 12 and 13. And The fee resolution in front of you now contains language that allows us to charge responsible parties for the cost of hazardous materials mitigation, and the fee will only be charged on medium to large scale incidents, and it gives us, like I said, the ability to recover our costs for the response to that call. And I think we can just take a look at the second slide, and the second slide just is a simple pie chart that just shows you the portion of our revenues that really have to do with the fees that Joe's been speaking about $180,000 out of our nearly $21 million budget. And with that, we'd like to take any questions.
Okay. Questions from the committee? Mrs. Self?
What are LTD fees?
Land development team.
Oh,
In other
okay.
words, the community development effort.
And T19?
Title 19 are state mandated inspections
Okay.
that we're required to do.
And hazmat fees, does this mean if you're in a car accident and your gas spills, no, is this more industrial?
Correct. That's more of an industrial, larger scale release of hazardous materials.
Because they were talking about that.
Councilmember Self?
Yes.
Yeah, this is for, we actually support a large-scale hazardous materials response team.
Right.
They're specially trained. They work out of Station 2. And this would only be for the larger type responses, not for a typical gasoline spill or anything like that.
Okay. Bob, can you put on the overhead my cartoon? Hope it shows up. My mission to scout out more taxes on the natives, well, they seem very restless, sir. And again, with everybody being hit with more of everything, I got a call from a woman who, and this $100 fee for apartment inspection, she had 3 fire extinguishers. They didn't go into any apartments. So I can't imagine it took an hour, unless it was portal to portal, and got charged $100. Wasn't good for her blood pressure. You know, that, and I remember because we have a small apartment building, and I called up and said, don't take this personal, I know you didn't do it. And then they talked about a fee consultant. You know, enough, in my opinion. I mean, it's a hard city, and so is it a minimum of an hour for apartment
Councilmember Self,
inspection?
that's one of the areas that we did address in this. We break it out into quarter-hour increments so that it actually is a little bit more user-friendly. It goes all the way down to $25 for that.
Okay, so just in this one, not in...
It existed before
But
a
it
while.
wasn't billed like that.
Correct. For a while, we were charging $89 minimum.
That's
and
when
that was the base
got really
fee.
upset, yes. It was
Correct.
a new one.
And so now we've broken it out, and it's not very scientific. It's not broken out into FTEs, because when an engine company goes out, it's a captain, an engineer, and a firefighter at whatever rates they happen to make based on their own pay scales. So if it's a quarter hour, it's a very rough calculation. But they are allowed that discretion, so that if they're out on a place for 15 minutes, they charge the 15-minute rate.
Councilmember Self, I'd also like to comment that our engine company inspection program is something that's it's constantly being worked on to be improved. I would certainly encourage the person that commented to you to contact the fire department, because we respond to each one of inquiries on a personal basis. We want to make sure that we're providing the highest level of service, and we follow up and make sure that that is done to the extent where there might have been some duplication or errors in bookkeeping. We'll send out an engine company to do a free inspection if that's the case. So our main goal is to provide for fire and life safety here in Santa Barbara, and I'm very proud of that. I think we have a very effective program, and I think our very low fire loss results in low insurance rates for the community, and that's why Santa Barbara is a special place.
Well, please don't take this as a criticism. You know, my overall criticism is government overall, that we extract money from our citizens to find out how we can find new pockets to put our fingers into. And I find that difficult. You know, with this cap and trade, it's going to be the air we breathe pretty soon. You know, where will it end where we keep finding new little nooks to extract money? And as having this apartment, we keep our rents very low. We have long-term people. We love them to pieces. But when we get these added fees, added water, added this, they have to pay for it. So we're hurting the very lowest echelon of our residents by raising things. So, you know, that's why I think the cartoon was well put. Thank you.
And if I could say, we are, as a department, as you can see, since we haven't raised rates since 2005, very reluctant to raise rates, and probably to a fault. So it's, in this case, it's one of those things where we're basically trying to catch up a little bit.
Mr. White, did you have any questions?
I don't think so.
One question I had is, it would be interesting to know, again, some at least rough idea of the cost recovery rates for these different services. I think that would be of interest.
And I think, although I don't know off the top of my head, I think that would be a pretty easy thing to do.
Great. It's good.
Yeah, we could certainly do that, and you'd find that this is a fraction, a very small fraction of the
That's what I
actual cost
suspect.
of providing the services. That's why I use the word reasonable, and value is what's really important to us.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. White, did you have a
I have
question?
a comment, yeah.
Sure, please.
And that is that I'm concerned about a $25 fee. I don't know what it costs to process a fee, but if it costs us $26 to process a $25 fee, it's kind of like, anyway, that's a concern, and I'm sure that we want to be cost effective. I mean, just the tracking of that stuff has to be expensive. I mean, any comments on that?
I would like to comment on that. Part of probably the main way that we would charge the $25 fee is in the course of land development team work. We were finding that, particularly with the new sprinkler ordinance, we would have to literally roll out the plans, do the calculations, try to figure out does this rise to the level of square footage, et cetera, and spend a significant amount of time on it, all to discover they don't need them. And then we would roll them back up and put them away. But because they're routed to us and because they become a plan check review under our LDT, that's one of the areas where to charge them $89 for basically nothing it would be excessive. And so it's almost, and I hate to use the term administrative fee, but it's a plan review with no follow-up fee is basically what it comes down to. And we can use it as a nominal fee in other areas as well, but I agree with you. I don't think it's a good idea to write up a full permit, do paperwork, and all that, and the follow up that goes with it, only to charge $25, and that wouldn't be the purpose of that fee. Okay.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Okay, last but not least, police. And Deputy Chief Mannix is here.
Good afternoon, Deputy Chief.
Good afternoon, members of Finance Committee. Today I'm going to have a relatively short discussion on police revenues and specifically proposed changes for this upcoming fiscal year. As you know, the police department is primarily supported by the general fund to the tune of 84%, with 16% of our budget derived from departmental revenues. Nearly half of that revenue source is derived from parking citation fees. We are recommending no increases in the fee rates for our parking citations, primarily because we adjusted these, a significant adjustment 2 years ago, and we find that our current rates are contemporary with industry standards. So we are not recommending an adjustment to any fee schedules there. However, if I can call your attention to the document viewer, you will see some new revenue sources. Most of these are new services, so they're just not new revenues on things we're currently doing. The first is the microfiche report charge. As you can see, it's a very small amount of money, just $450. We found that we have not been collecting a $5 surcharge to cover the cost of researching documents in microfiche that other general fund agencies are already charging. So this is an attempt to just bring our practices in alignment with other agencies. As you can see, we only project $450 in revenue for the entire year, so it's a very small amount. Next, however, is a new service, the Doc Viewer Traffic Collision Report, and we are projecting a revenue of $20,000. We're actually very excited to offer this service to the public. We take 1,600 traffic accident reports a year, and when the insurance carriers need to get a copy of the report, they must mail in a request by postal service. We then process it internally. We have to pull the report, Xerox it. We then have to mail it out to the insurance carrier, and there's perhaps a 2-week delay in getting that report. With this system, we're able to upload our traffic accident reports into a database, which can be accessed by the insurance carriers automatically. And they would pay a $25 fee to get immediate access to our traffic accident reports. They're happy to do it. They're very excited about us going online with this. It would also have the added benefit of reducing our workload. So we really see this revenue source as a win-win, both for the consumer and for the police department. And we're projecting a $20,000 revenue source on that. Next, you see the ABC permit endorsement fee. When someone is holding a special event and they want to get a temporary license to sell alcoholic beverages, they submit a permit to the police department. And we must endorse that permit and recommend its issuance to ABC in order for the requester to be granted the permit. In order to do that, we have to review the application. We have to see how they plan to separate underage drinkers from drinkers. We have to do quite a lot of work. And we have not ever charged a fee to try to recover the cost of this work. So we are recommending a $20 fee for this ABC permit. This would be new. Again, it would only bring in about $3,000 a year, but we think it's a reasonable and actually very nominal amount of money for the amount of work we do to grant one of these licenses. In addition, the requester, the license holder, is going to generate revenue of his own by selling the alcoholic beverage. So it just seems to be the cost of doing business. Finally, you will see a kennel licensing fee. This would be a new revenue source. However, it would not be a new fee. What I mean by that is there is currently in the municipal code already a fee schedule for $250 per kennel. So any, for example, an animal hospital that kennels dogs is already required to have a $250 fee. However, in some recent changes in supervision in our animal control unit, we realized we have not been collecting this fee. So this is just an attempt to collect a fee which is already on the books. There'll be about 10 a year which will be subject to this $250 fee. That concludes my presentation on our fee increases or proposals. Are there any questions?
Yep.
Okay, Mrs. Self?
The ABC permit endorsement, is this just for commercial, like a commercial vendor selling at Oak Park for a festival? Or is this if you are having a party as a private person? Because you have to get a permit through parks, is this in addition to that?
This would be a, well, for one example, your first question would be yes. However, maybe I can describe it a little more broadly. Perhaps a nonprofit wants to have well, let me give you an example, is the local tennis patrons will hold tennis tournaments here in Santa Barbara, and they want to have a small beer garden. They will sell alcohol to the people who want to come there and drink beer while they're watching the tennis tournament. They would be charged that $20 fee in order to get that application. A private party on a personal residence would not be required.
No, a private person, say, in a park.
If he plans to sell and distribute alcohol, that's
Okay,
correct.
not selling, just consuming. Because now in our parks, if you're going to have, say, a family reunion and you want to serve beer in most of our parks, I think it's 120, last I knew, permit from the parks, and then you had to have the fencing and a guard and all of that stuff. So does this add on to that fee?
If that person is attempting to get an ABC license, the
Okay,
answer would
that's
be
only
yes.
for sale,
Right,
not for family consumption.
that's correct.
Okay. And this document view for traffic collision sounds great. What is the cost for us being able to comply with that?
Zero.
Hey,
The
better
company
yet.
is very eager to get this service. They make money through the insurance carriers. Our primary vendor would be LexisNexis. Nearly all the insurance carriers go through them, and we are ready to go on July 1st.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Mr. White, any questions? Thank you, Deputy Chief. Anything else, Mr. Samaria?
That concludes our report. Thank you very much.
Very good. Meeting adjourned.